CFL Week 14 picks and predictions, game previews, coast to coast. Andrew and Bobby, coast to coast, meaning I'm on one side of the country, he's on the other side of the country, and we are both big followers, especially from a betting perspective of the CFL. Bobby, I had probably my worst pick of the season this past weekend. And everybody loves to start shows about bragging about themselves these days in the betting world. So, how about we started off by roasting ourselves a little bit? I had the under in the Banjo Bowl, Labor Day Classic, whatever you want to call it, part one of the Banjo Bowl, Winnipeg and Saskatchewan. It was 1-10 for Winnipeg, over under, I should say. And I don't know what got into both those teams, but an absolute shootout. The only thing I could say about that bet was that I knew I lost about 10 minutes into the game. So there was absolutely no sweat. But how was your week 13 and how are you?
I had the same feeling. 10 minutes into the Red Blacks game, I realized it was over. The worst part is I was sitting right behind their bench for 3 hours and had to watch it in person. So, um, yeah, not great. The whole weekend was great in Victoria. I know you were at Touchdown Atlantic last year, and I noted like you wouldn't even know there was a game going on in Halifax. Like it didn't really seem like anything was promoted, but Victoria really did a great job. The game itself like had its same problems as Halifax, like hour-long lineups. People were leaving in the end zone. So I know a couple guys that left after 5 minutes because uh, it was like a party zone in the end zone. But if there are like 8 people deep, you can't see the game, and the beer line is like an hour where the restaurants were all empty. So they went to a local bar and watched the game instead. So a few kinks to work out, but overall it was a great weekend. Except for the Red Blacks, they didn't really. Well, Eli Stove made the trip, and that's about it.
I always mention it's only a 9 team league, but one thing I really have to appreciate is the competitive nature in some of these rivalry games. Like with there only being 9 teams, they're so familiar with each other that there's definitely some rivalries between whether it's within provinces or whether it's even one team in one conference and one team in the other when they go head to head. But this past weekend and even some games we have this upcoming weekend, it's always exciting to see these battles. And, I mean, the Toronto and Hamilton game, great example. And, those two teams do not like each other. It is a great CFL rivalry. And of course, what happened was probably quite a bit of the unexpected. I don't think anyone saw that really coming, at least from how it panned out in that way. And of course, you got Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, you've got Edmonton, Calgary. There's all kinds of really exciting matchups, and then of course there's the game that you just talked about, where it's not as much of a rivalry, but it was teams playing for the second time in as many weeks. All right, so every time I said quarterbacks we think are going to start, you would jump in with a smile and say, "Hey, Andrew, come on now. I know." Do you feel you jinxed yourself by saying that a little bit? You're like, Andrew, I've got a perfect record here. All jokes aside, what are your thoughts on the quarterback situation right now in the CFL?
Well, so last weekend it was MBT starting over Trey Ford, and I mentioned when we went over it, it wasn't something I was too concerned with, just because I don't think they make much of a difference to the line. Um, but this week, like there is a game, maybe two, where I think it's okay to say you don't know who's starting, and we'll get to it with the Bombers when we get to that game. But there's also seems to be, I don't know if there's like some fake quarterback controversy in Calgary, and then Edmonton is also a toss up too. But I think it'd be tough to yank MBT after he finally started winning games while basically executing the same as he did before.
Yeah, I kind of feel for Trey Ford. I've always been kind of in his corner, but with this particular situation, there's nothing you can really say because he did get his chance. He was playing well when he was in there. He gets injured in a play. If you remember, I said that he has to chill out with trying to make something out of nothing every time. A good quarterback knows how to throw the ball away. You take a bad hit, you get injured, all of a sudden you lose your spot. And MBT has been playing some good football. And as I always mention, with how small this league is, all you have to do is put a few games together, a few wins together, and you're back in the playoff hunt. You're back in the race. You've got CFL TSN analysts talking about Grey Cup futures on the Elks. I think we'll hold off on that, but this team is definitely coming along. So it's a tough situation, but we have to say the offense is is alive for the Elks, and you know that old saying where like people say a good offense is a good defense. Well, I feel like for the Elks right now, a good defense is a good offense. If they put up 30 plus points a game, their defense doesn't have to worry as much.
Yeah, for sure. And to be fair to Trey Ford, I don't think he's 100% yet. So it's just like there's no real reason to rush him back. But as soon as he throws a few ducks or lays a few eggs, then I think Trey Ford's right back in there. But I don't think Trey Ford's lost the job right now. But we'll see in a couple of weeks once he's back to 100%.
And I have been seeing that stuff about the situation in Calgary. The disappointing thing for me is that I found myself betting against Calgary a couple times earlier in the year when I saw they were covering all kinds of point spreads. I thought I was going to jump in at the right time, kind of that sell high point. And I jumped in a little bit too early. A few of my losses early in the year were against Calgary, and then now they're kind of the ATS numbers have really started to level out for them. But why don't you start us off with game one for this week?
Yeah, so Lions in Montreal. I think there's most of the lines are at 3.5, maybe three for Montreal. I don't really want to get too excited about the Lions last week. Like Ottawa just didn't show up. The week before, the Lions didn't show up, and a couple of weeks before that, the Lions didn't show up in Winnipeg either, right? So it's been a while since they've had a good game on the road. I think Rourke finally played the game that everyone thought he was going to have, and it probably killed our VA MOP futures. They seem to be dead in the water now. Just not enough games for him to come back and make a difference, even if something does go wrong. Montreal's a tough place to play off the bye week. Bouncing between three and a hook. I think that's warranted. I think Montreal should be favored by a little more than a field goal. So nothing particularly for me on this game. I think there needs to be a lot of movement for me to take a side either way.
Yeah, this one for me is I don't think I've been on Montreal enough this year. I don't think I've made and sometimes you say, is it too late? Is it too late for me to be saying that? But when I take a look at some of their outings that they've had, like, can you really pinpoint any bad efforts that this team has had? Like the last time that they were held,
the only game they lost was that one where Fajardo got hurt and Caleb Evans came in, right? So
yeah, and I mean like that game against Toronto, 37-18, it was just a really weird game. And looking forward, 20 points against the Riders, 33 against Hamilton, 33 the week after that, 27 against the Riders, and then of course most recently 21 against the Elks. One thing I have noticed though, this team plays their best defense at home. Again, besides that Toronto game, they seem to be a different team at home. So I feel like each week I'm mentioning which teams I do not care about home field and which teams I do care about home field for. I have been kind of looking at this Montreal team as a team that I can definitely look to make money on at home. And one thing I've noticed as well, these 3.5s on the road, they've been really profitable in the CFL. But we're seeing the 3.5, and it's some books almost like it looks like it's on its way to 4. But I look at this total at 50, and I feel like there's going to be some type of overreaction to what Rourke was able to do last week. Is Rourke back? Is this the Canadian kid? All these nicknames they're throwing around, the TSN panel losing their mind after he has a good first 10 minutes, as you mentioned last week. So the under 50 is a play that I'm looking at here, Bobby, because I think that what makes this Montreal team so great is their defense. And I've said that since week 1. They've also been dealing with some injuries at the receiving position. And I think that you look at some of the play calling that they've made, they've been running the ball a lot more lately. They haven't been throwing the ball as deep as of late, and it seems like their clock management has been great. And when you look at kind of this time of year, when the seasons are changing, when the temperature is changing outside, CFL's teams have to get ready for the type of football that you play in colder weather, in worse conditions, in the snow, if that's a case. So I feel like with all that being said, it kind of takes so many weeks for these totals to get from 47 and a half, 48, 49, 50, and they get so pushed up. And I understand two teams more than capable of scoring points. I also understand that I started off the show by making fun of myself for a rough under loss on Saskatchewan and Winnipeg. But I'm not scared to go back at it with an under. I think under 50 is a play here. Look, Montreal, they're not scared to blow teams out and raise and put the points up. But I also feel like sometimes when you have two teams that are supposed to be very respected in the league, I know BC struggled over the last handful of weeks, but sometimes it can be more of a chess match than it can be kind of absolute fireworks. So, any thoughts on that total look?
Yeah, I agree. Like Montreal, like don't forget they've been by far and away the best defense in the league. Um, Fajardo again, like he's not going to light it up for 4 or 5 touchdowns a game, but they've been winning games in that low 20, mid 20 range. So yeah, I like especially when these numbers at the beginning of the year they all kind of were starting out at 48s. Now they're up to 50, 51s. And if you want to go hear someone pick overs, you can go watch something sponsored by a sports book like FanDuel, and
Mm.
they'll give you all the overs, all the money line favorites you want. So here we're trying to be profitable, and you do that mostly by betting unders and dogs.
Yeah, and just really quickly with NFL starting this week, game on Thursday night, game on Friday night. Look forward to seeing how many props just get absolutely crushed to the over. And when I say crushed, I mean by people lining up to bet everybody to the over, whether it's Travis Kelsey, whether it's Xavier Worthy, whether it's Christian Watson. I think people have to be careful in some of these first few games of the season. A guy could have a really good game and still not hit his receiving yards or his receptions. Something to be careful about. But yeah, if you're watching TV and they don't give you an under, you should probably just not take their advice. I respect people that bet
Yeah.
unders. I'll just put it that way. And we're not saying that you can't make money on overs. That's for sure. Look at what happened yesterday in the CFL. Both games go over. Weird ending to the second game, but hey, ended up going over. All right. So we saw you tweet out that video about you at the Ottawa game right behind, giving the old thumbs down. So, what do you think about their game this
I was
week?
doing a bunch of field goal kicks too. I didn't
Yeah.
know why he's so obsessed with that. So before this game, I gave out anytime touchdown. I said for entertainment purposes only on Eli Stove because I like the odds were the guy's never played a snap in the CFL and he was only like plus 275 or something like that. Well, it turned out like halfway through the game, the coach realized he was their only hope if they were going to have a chance. Unfortunately, he realized that halfway through the game when they were down 31-6. Um, it was kind of disappointing. I was kind of shocked to see that he was like their number one target. But I was kind of basically did everything except hit that long shot no name anytime touchdown for me. So couldn't even win it. Couldn't even win the long shots on that game. I was just destroyed all over the board there. Uh, Argonauts, on the other hand, had the same like kind of strategy against Hamilton. The difference is they know how to come back, and that was actually the second time you were at that other game where they almost came back. Or did they come back and win that game?
No.
Oh, Hamilton. Okay, so it was like, but you said throughout the whole game, you knew
Yeah.
there was a feeling in the stadium that everybody kind of knew, like, oh, the Argos are coming back,
They
and
had
it
a
kind
late
of felt the
drive
same
for a
way.
field goal. Late drive for a field goal, and they just couldn't get into field goal range.
Okay, so it was right where that was where Milanovic declined the penalty and the
Yeah.
clock ran and forced him. So um, I think Toronto. I don't really think it's an argument here that Toronto is the better team. Um, is Ottawa likely to put up 3 touchdowns in the first quarter? Probably not. Toronto showed a lot coming back. Chad Kelly seems to be back to like pretty decent form. Um, and now the Red Blacks, like they just released Rock Armstead. who told me after the game, best back in the league, no carries, talking about the second half for the Red Blacks there. Those were his last words on a CFL field. And it was an honor to be the guy I told it to. So
Wait, hold
that,
on.
that
We got to expand more on that. Well, what's the story there? You
they're
you chatted
walking
with
off the
him, or
field, and I'm like the only guy wearing my Red Blacks jersey, and he says, "Hey, best back in the league, no carries," and just walks into the dressing room. So he was
no
pretty
way.
pissed off that whole. He spent like most of the second half on the bike. He was furious on the bench. So it wasn't really a surprise to see he was released, but you could argue he was one of the best backs in the league. He had a few issues, like I would say, picking fights with training staff on the opposite teams or the refs and things like that. But he was a good running back, and now Ottawa is running games back to being non-existent here. The bottom line here is I think the wrong team's favored right now. The Ottawa, I think the line's at I just locked in at 1.5. So I like the Argos at 1.5 here. I'm not taking the money line because I'm not going to get burned by a 1 point win or a stupid tie. One is the third most common number in the CFL, and it's popped up a few times this year as well. So um, I've got the Argos at plus 1.5, and I'm more than happy to not be on the Red Blacks. They fooled me now twice this season, so I'm swearing off of them again for the second time.
They've been such a tough team to look at because whether you're jumping in on them at the right time or whether you're jumping off the train, you want to bet against them. It's tough. And one thing about them at home, I'm gonna go out there and say now, if you would have read some of my write ups to clients, you'd laugh at how strongly I felt about how it was time to sell high on them. They're overachievers, and maybe I was a bit rough. Maybe I was a bit overreacting, exaggerant, whatever it would be. But I think this is a case here where is this number as if Cameron Dukes is the quarterback? I mean, look, I don't care what people think about Chad Kelly as a person, but as a quarterback, this number to me seems a little bit weird. And for Ottawa to be where they are in the standings, I understand that. And for them to do what they've done, and for them to, 2 weeks ago, put the numbers up they did against the BC Lions. And then last week, what happened. But I still think Toronto, especially because there's two things that happen, right, Bobby? Let's say, and you and I have talked about situational stuff, and I really care about that. If they would have beaten the brakes off Hamilton last week, you wouldn't hear me really liking this pick this week, honestly. And I feel like in a small league like this, there is that mindset at practice every single week. It's a little bit different. And I think that guys kind of go into the next week. It's an interdivision game again, and they're going to be extra motivated. And for us, as a betting perspective, you mentioned you think the wrong team is favored. We're just asking them to win. Like, I understand you're talking plus 1.5, but realistically, you know, we're not asking Toronto to do anything besides win the ball game. And all we've been hearing is about Ottawa's home record, how they turn things around at home, their home scoring, their home defense, whatever. To me, this is a spot where Toronto's going to come and motivate and get the job done. So we're on the same page. I like it, and I'll tell you what, I'll be off the total in this one. 51.5 is the number. I'm going to stay away. Don't like it, and I think maybe we could probably get a decent in-game spot if this game starts a little bit slow. But I don't think it will, so I'll just ride with Toronto here to get the job done. Also worthy of
Just
mentioning, yeah, I was
yeah,
going to
go
say
ahead.
team totals. I don't talk about them enough that much, and I don't give them out at Wager Talk, although some of my peers do, because a lot of people that follow my bets, my clients, they you can't walk up to a Vegas sports book or some sports books and bet CFL team totals. This could be a good game if you have access to it to just bet the Toronto team total, because that way you're just not even worrying about what Ottawa does. And so many games that you and I have been, or I'll speak for myself, but when we've been against Ottawa, a lot of times our team is hitting their team total and then still end up losing. So it could be a good opportunity to take Toronto to get up and over their team total, and you don't have to worry about what goes on and what the other team is doing. So Team totals, I think, are still worthy of getting a look. And as of right now, the number I think is going to be in the late 20s. I'm seeing, so probably a good look.
Yeah, I just added that up. I'll set an alarm for half an hour from now to search around for that Argos team total. And like I just wanted to say, like, this is absolutely a Cameron Dukes line. This is what I would think the line would do, or where it would be if he was starting. But it's not Cam Dukes, it's Chad Kelly. And if you want to compare him like talent wise to Nathan Rourke, I don't know if the TSN camera can move that far or wide enough, but anytime Rourke put that ball in the air, you look and there was a line wide open. Like you knew the touchdown was coming as it was 10 feet away from his 10 feet off his hands. So I'd expect Chad Kelly to kind of torch the Red Blacks the same way. I guess you're kind of eliminating the variables that could send a game the wrong way just by taking that team total. So I like that one for sure.
And usually, when Toronto does well, they put up points. They're kind of one of those teams. They either look solid or they don't. Even though they've been pretty good most of the year, they're kind of like when they look good, they do look pretty good. All right, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, game number 2 in as many weeks, 48 the total in this one here. +2 for Saskatchewan. Of course, the home team's the favorite. What did you see in that game last week besides another injury to Winnipeg's favorite quarterback? I don't know what's going on with Zach, man,
Second
but
favorite quarterback.
yeah, true. But I mean, what do you think? Is the number kind of weird to you based on what you saw last week?
Um, yeah, I think like this line itself. I think this is a Streveler line. Um, Kolaros isn't in concussion protocol officially. Like they say it's precautionary, but that's the same exact word they used in June, and Streveler started that next game. Then again, that game was against Ottawa. It wasn't against a good team. This game's a must-win, really, for the Bombers. So there is a chance that Kolaros could play. They don't practice until tomorrow. And I think Mike O'Shea is one of those guys who likes to play mind games, thinks that matters, needs to rely on it, which I don't think the Bombers really need to. But he's one of those guys who likes to play those kind of games. So I don't know if you're even going to know going into game day who's going to be starting. But you'll see like a narrative this week that they both won a game against each other this year. This is important because this is for the season tiebreaker. Well, it's not really, unless Winnipeg somehow ties a game. Like Saskatchewan's got fewer losses. It's not going to matter. They use a point system in the CFL, so that tie is worth something. So if Saskatchewan wins here, Winnipeg's got to make up 2 games in their final 5. To see like first place is pretty much gone, I would say, for them. So like again, where the numbers at, I just don't have any faith in Saskatchewan making any good decisions. We saw them get roasted again this week. It's amazing. They lose all these games by 1, 2, 3 points. Everyone wants to blame the field goal kicker, the command center, basically anybody except for the head coach, who, if he just made a couple good decisions on third down, or even a few weeks ago to snap the ball at a proper time, run the clock out so you're not going to give up a field goal to lose or a rouge to lose the game. If he just made a couple good decisions, they'd be probably running away with this division. But right now, like that 2, I think that's a Streveler number. If Kolaros is in, I'll jump on that all the way up to 3. If Streveler is in, I'd probably look at this total. Like it's 48.5 right now. I don't know how much that's really going to move down. Like they're not going to release anything during the week, but I think the move here is if Kolaros starts, take the Bombers on the spread. If Streveler starts, I'd lean towards the under, but we all know that I've never won a total bet in the CFL. I'm 0-1 officially
On the year. Well, I like it as well. And one thing that I've gotten better at over the last year and a half, Bobby, is whether it's a prop side or a total with a player, team, or whatever it may be, not being scared to go back on the same wager. And I've got someone from Wager Talk I do props with, Andy, and he says to me, if you lose a prop on a guy, let's say it's hockey with shots on goal, you got to go back on it because you didn't like that guy and his streak. Unless you're betting against the opponent, let's say they give up a lot of chances, you're usually betting on somebody, right? So if I liked the under last week, shouldn't I like it a hell of a lot more at a little bit of the same number, if not better, with a backup quarterback, with a chance to go over film, with a chance to right some wrongs? And if I'm not mistaken, was that one not one of the stupidest plays that we've seen where there's like fumbles in the end zone. There's fumbles off a kickoff. There's a guy touching the ball, and then I mean, there's just weird stuff going on in that game that can be preventable in the next meeting. So I do like the under, or do like the under, but more importantly, I was looking at the 23.5 for the first half, and so many of these CFL games have been backdoor overs. I'm very tempted by that 23.5 in the first half, and I will think that if the CFL gives us the breaking news graphic on Thursday and tells us that Strevler's starting, that number might be at 21.5 or even 22 or one of those numbers. So this is definitely one of those ones where if you and I were to, if we had a graphics guy right now in the background making production stuff for us, we'd probably put a big thing on the screen right now saying, if you like this under, bet it now, because I don't think this number is going to get any better. Of course, it could get a little worse if Zach's out there, but I still think this is the number to look at. And again, the same thing goes for what I said about, if you like something, bet it again. Just because the under streak has been broken for Winnipeg doesn't mean they're going to go on an over streak now. They're still a team that's 2-10 over under on the year. Let's not forget about those previous records. Let's not forget about what they've done all year just because of 1 week, right? So we're reading each other's mails this week. We'll find out if it's a good thing. But so far this season, on a large scale, when you and I have been on the same page, it has been a pretty good thing. All right, Edmonton and Calgary. -2.5 for the Elks. 51 is the total. And when I look at this team, how much they're scoring right now and the consistency of it, and then you see kind of, it looks like there's some problems in the locker room and just kind of even in the coaching room for Calgary. How do they respond in this one, do you think? Because when I look at this one, this is one of those ones where I think this is kind of a statement game for the Elks. I know that might sound kind of funny, and I'm not trying to be one of those talking heads building up hype for no reason, but it's one thing to beat a team once. It's one thing to put a few wins together. If you can put a few wins together and beat the same team back-to-back weeks, I feel like that is a statement, and that will actually change the perception of this Elks team on the year. And I think they do it. I think they cover this week and get the job done. Do you agree?
Yeah, like these stamps. So this number right now, I think, is a Jake Mayer line, and there's a little bit of rumblings. Dickinson was asked about Logan Bonner after the game because he came in and did some mop-up duty. He said like he didn't rule it out, which I thought was pretty wild. Just because he's their third string quarterback, like Matthew Schultz, he practiced all week last week. He did his final game on the 6-game IR, so he could be available this week too. So like this number right now, I think is kind of like a Jake Mayer line. If it's Matt Schultz, I don't think there's too much of a drop off. I don't think he's seriously talking about Logan Bonner because I'd be taking the Elks all the way up to a touchdown. He's not a good quarterback. He's what do I have him? I have him dead last. There's a couple of guys on here I don't even remember, like Christian Harker. Like he's not in the league anymore, but I'd rather have him. He's maybe a top 40 CFL quarterback, and there's only about 25 quarterbacks in the league. So, like
Some guys that
nothing's
aren't even
inspiring.
drafted yet are
Yeah,
currently higher right now.
yeah, I'd take him over like who was that guy in the Broncos, Kendall Hinton or something, who started that game during COVID. But other than that, there's nothing about this Stamps team that's inspiring any confidence, and they kind of overperformed at the start of the year. They have this big playoff streak going, but the only reason they made the playoffs last year because Saskatchewan hasn't won a game after Labor Day since 2022. Um, I think the Riders do have a game left in them. They're playing the Red Blacks, and they've got two against Calgary, who seems to be dead in the water. And if not, Edmonton doesn't seem to have given up. So I think the season's pretty much over for these Stamps. Um, the number right now, I think maybe it's like your worst case is Jake Mayer starts. You have a toss up bet in my mind. But if it's Schultz, maybe you got a little bit of edge. And if you got Bonner walking out there, then I don't know if you could still bet season win totals mid season, but I wouldn't take the Stamps to win another game if that guy's stepping out there. So nothing for me on it. I think Edmonton should be a slight favorite, but I think getting close to a field goal is pretty close. I don't really want to overreact.
Yeah.
Just because I've had them rated a little higher than most people during the year because they haven't really been playing bad in these losses. I'm not a standings guy. I'm a power rankings guy. So I feel comfortable where I have them at, and nothing for me. But if keep an eye who Dickinson announces as a quarterback, and maybe it's time to jump on it if you think he's going to say Logan Bonner, but I don't think he's going to say that.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of people were down on this Calgary team going into the year, and then they had some decent games, covered some point spreads, and now they're starting to turn into kind of who we thought they might be. So, um, curious to see what goes on with this team over the next handful of weeks. But I think a lot of what we see will tell us what we should expect for next year. And I think Jake Mayer had a good start to his year, and he's kind of fallen off from that. So. Gotta love this comment. Even though you guys had a bad week, still good information. Let's bounce back. Keep it up. That's a positive comment about a negative week. So I appreciate that. And hey, just because college football is here, guys, just because NFL is here, we're gonna try and make you guys some money still in the CFL. We haven't forgotten about it. We're still gonna bet it. We're still gonna try and put out the content that we can to put you guys in the right direction. So thanks everybody for watching. Make sure you follow Bobby on X, follow myself, and hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. The like button is more important than subscribing, than commenting, than anything. It helps us out big time with the algorithm, and the both of us really do appreciate that. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time on Coast to Coast.